Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award compensatory damages in the amount of $10 million. As against Amber Heard, we, the jury, award punitive damages in the amount of $5 million.
It was Johnny Depp's day in a Fairfax, Virginia courtroom, and very much not Amber Heard's. Jurors wholeheartedly accepted Depp's claim that Heard, his ex-wife, defamed him in a newspaper column that suggested, while never stating outright, that he abused her during their marriage. Heard, as you may know, sued Depp for defamation as well, and today won a partial victory along with $2 million. Still, she says she is disappointed, quote, beyond words for herself and for women who dare to speak up and speak out. Depp was not in the courtroom today, but in England, where he decided to tour with guitarist Jeff Beck. He says the jury gave me my life back, which may be true, but those punitive damages come with an asterisk. This is interesting. I don't think a lot of people realize this. Under Virginia law, they are capped at $350,000. Okay, so time to bring in my experts. Josh Schiffer, he is a criminal injury and civil rights trial lawyer, and Caitlin Becker, the senior reporter for DailyMail.com. Before I get to both of you, I want to quickly play what Depp's attorneys said outside the courtroom shortly after that verdict came down. Take a listen.
We are also most pleased that the trial has resonated for so many people in the public who value truth and justice. Now that the jury has reached its conclusive verdict, it's time to turn the page and look to the future.
Okay, Caitlin, let's start with you. I mean, you've been following this all along. This whole thing has taken on a life of its own. I mean, it's insane online, and people have become totally obsessed. Most people, obviously, were in Depp's corner. What do you think this means for him moving forward? Like, does his career just skyrocket now? Not that he wasn't already, on fire before this.
It's been a bit of a debate what's going to happen to Johnny Depp after this. And with some of the people that I was talking to earlier today, there was a divide on whether or not this is going to hurt him or help him. Personally, I think that this is going to help him. I think that this case and this televised trial gave Johnny Depp fans something to rally behind. It really lit a fire between them. And I think his team would be foolish not to try to capitalize off of that. I mean, they're not going to go back into time. The next Pirates movie starring Johnny Depp is not getting greenlit tomorrow. He's not going to be recast as Grindelwald in the Harry Potter franchise. However, he can take this and spin this while people are still in his corner, and that's going to get them to the box office.
One thing, Josh, that I found very, very interesting is there was the verdict today in Virginia. It was basically the opposite verdict from what we saw in the United Kingdom. Of course, in the UK, it was a judge who decided. In Virginia, it was a jury. I mean, what did you make of that? Literally the opposite verdict.
Well, there's been a lot of outcry in the legal community about this case because clearly we've touched a cultural rail. Today's decision and the verdict, it's a watershed moment, and lawyers are really concerned about how this is going to play out in public and in courts. The entire domestic violence victim universe is kind of freaking out because we just watched a jury thoroughly reject well-documented claims of domestic violence, claims that weren't actually prosecuted, but they were very valid claims, and a lot of commentaries about how if this had been a criminal case, it would have been a very different result. And in fact, the civil lawyers are following along that same line of thought. There are even calls among some civil lawyers that there should be a motion for a judgment withstanding the verdict, because basically, the jury may have gotten it wrong. At least that's the perspective of a lot of legal commentators who are not taking into account the intense cultural approval that Johnny Depp got. Just like Caitlin said, this is a huge opportunity for Mr. Depp to rehabilitate his image, and he walks away the winner. We'll see if Amber Heard can craft something to continue getting the forum and the place to speak her truth that she so desperately wants.
Caitlin, every single day, and I know you were at the trial, I mean, there were just throngs of Johnny Depp supporters outside shouting. They had signs. Do you think that may have impacted things? Could that have impacted the jury?
You know, I wasn't actually in the courtroom and I wasn't physically at the trial, so I'm not sure how much interaction the jurors got with those people outside of the courthouse, but I think it's really impossible to have ignored them, the shouts, the screams, even within the gallery itself. People waited in line for hours and hours and hours every single morning to get one of those coveted wristbands to sit inside of the courtroom, and they were wholly in Johnny Depp's corner with maybe a few scattered Amber Heard supporters, and that was evident in the room. That was evident in the courthouse. That was evident when Johnny Depp was on the stand and kind of endeared himself to the crowd. The judge several times during his 4 days of testimony had to admonish the gallery to keep quiet and not laugh along and not support him. And I would be remiss to think that if, you know, I was in that jury box, it wouldn't affect me. I wouldn't want it to. I would want to think I was impartial, but it's impossible to believe that that kind of influence doesn't get in somehow.
Yeah, you have to imagine they saw some of it. Josh, you made a good point a second ago just about the way that this is going to impact the domestic violence community, other people who make claims. But I got to tell you, on Twitter, there are a lot of people also saying, you know, look, this shows that you cannot always believe every single accuser, that all of the evidence has to be laid out. So, you know, that is going to be interesting, I think, Josh.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a criminal defense attorney by trade. It's where I started my career. And everybody's saying, hey, we've now got a great analogous voice for the false allegations claim. And really, when you practice domestic violence, the vast majority of those cases are he said, she said, without a lot of witnesses. And this was a great cultural illustration of that. It's a cultural illustration of power dynamics and how different interpersonal relationships work on a domestic violence level. This case is bigger than people really realize, because in the court system, since everyone knows about it, it becomes currency. It becomes currency for our arguments and our advocacy, regardless of whether you're a prosecutor or a defense attorney. You're going to be hearing about this for literally decades.
Yeah, just fascinating to think about, and so interesting also the way that this captivated America. I don't think a lot of people saw that early on, that this was literally going to just captivate the country and really the world. People followed along so closely. Josh Schiffer and Caitlin Becker, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
It seems the final chapter in the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard saga is playing itself out, with Amber Heard now giving an in-depth interview where, in the most passive-aggressive way imaginable, she denounced the jury that awarded Depp the $10+ million for her claiming that he abused her. Now, before I play pieces of this interview and tell you why I think she at times is living in an alternate reality, let me say that I initially thought that it was crazy for Johnny Depp to sue her. I saw that verdict against him in England, where he unsuccessfully sued a newspaper for calling him a wife-beater. The judge believed he was a wife-beater, and so I figured he'll have a very little chance here. But then we got to hear the evidence, the testimony from witnesses, including Depp and Heard, and that certainly changed a lot of minds about the case. But Heard still seems to think that the jurors and the public, who didn't believe much of her account, could not have possibly been basing that on the evidence that was presented. No, it had to be because he was a great actor, which, at least from my perspective, didn't mean a thing.
There's no polite way to say it. The jury looked at the evidence you presented. They listened to your testimony, and they did not believe you. They thought you were lying.
How could, I'll put it this way, how could they make a judgment? How could they not come to that conclusion? They had sat in those seats and heard over 3 weeks of nonstop, relentless testimony from paid employees, and towards the end of the trial, randos, as I say.
What? The jury sat through hours and hours of witnesses who testified on Heard's behalf as well. They listened to lengthy recordings of screaming matches and arguments, depositions, and other evidence presented by both sides. So how could this group, mere mortals, see past the bright lights of Hollywood? Don't worry, Heard doesn't blame them. It's not their fault that they're just dupes.
You don't blame the jury?
I don't blame them. It wasn't, I don't blame them. I actually understand he's a beloved character and people feel they know him. He's a fantastic actor.
Their job is to not be dazzled by that. Their job is to look at the facts and the evidence. And they did not believe your testimony or your evidence.
Again, how could they, after listening to 3.5 weeks of testimony about how I was an uncredible person, not to believe a word that came out of my mouth?
Both sides argued the other was lying, and the jurors and much of the public believed his side. Heard all but accused jury members, who, granted, were not sequestered, of violating their oath and allowing their decision to be influenced not by the evidence presented for weeks, but by the response on social media, which was almost all against her.
Vast majority of this trial was played out on social media. I think that this trial is an example of that gone haywire, gone amok, and the jury is not immune to that.
You think the jury saw it?
How could they not? I think even the most well-intentioned juror, it would have been impossible to avoid this.
Heard's team says that they'll appeal the decision. I assume one of the claims about the jurors being tainted will be included in that appeal. And yes, there were crowds gathered outside cheering for Depp and booing Heard every time one of them went by in their vehicles back and forth to court. I'm sure that was very difficult and painful. But to say that it was that, rather than her often far-fetched testimony that sunk the case for her, I don't know. I think Savannah Guthrie got it right when she pointed out to Heard that her apparent inability to take any sort of responsibility may have been the biggest problem for her during the trial.
When I asked his lawyers, why do you think you won? And the answer I got was, because she never took responsibility for anything she did in the marriage.
I did do and say horrible, regrettable things throughout my relationship. I behaved in horrible, almost unrecognizable to myself ways. I have so much regret. You know, I made a lot of mistakes. But I've always told the truth.
And Heard is doubling down on the same claims that she made of abuse.
Do you stand by your testimony and your accusations against Johnny Depp about abuse?
Of course, to my dying day, will stand by every word of my testimony.
He says he never hit you.
He can't.
Never. Is that a lie?
Yes, it is.
What about the witnesses who said they have seen you instigate physical violence?
I've seen firsthand how people will file rank and support the person they depend on.
Did they all come in and lie in court?
I am not here to call any of his witnesses any names.
Except she sort of is. Look, she could get sued again. I mean, she's repeating everything that got her on the hook for defaming Johnny Depp in the first place.
Having been found liable, are you nervous, as we are here today, about what you can say now?
Of course. I took for granted what I assumed was my right to speak.
Do you feel like you could be sued again by him for defamation?
I'm scared that no matter what I do, no matter what I say or how I say it, every step that I take will present another opportunity for this sort of silencing, which is what I guess a defamation lawsuit is meant to do. It's meant to take your voice.
Heard even tried to give Savannah Guthrie, who is an attorney, a brief civics lesson on what freedom of speech actually means.
Some people, they just were frankly disgusted by the whole thing and don't have much sympathy for either one of you. Can you understand that?
Absolutely. I would not blame the average person for looking at this and how it's been covered and not think that it is Hollywood brats at their worst. But what people don't understand is it's actually so much bigger than that. This is not only about our First Amendment right to speak.
But here's the thing about the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects free speech. It doesn't protect lies that amount to defamation. And that was the issue in the case.
Yes, exactly. You can't go into, the free speech does not protect you if you go into a crowded theater and you scream fire. We get the concept of free speech from the Greeks. My understanding of what that means is not just the freedom to speak. It's a freedom to speak truth to power.
But truth is the word.
Yes.
And that was the issue.
And that's all I spoke. And I spoke it to power, and I paid the price.
By the way, that famous line, the one about yelling fire in a crowded theater, only applies when there is no fire, when it's actually a lie. Guthrie also brought up something else that may have significantly damaged Heard's reputation with the jury recordings showing Heard may have been the instigator of the violence against Depp.
I am looking at a transcript that says, he says, you start physical fights, and you say, I did start a physical fight. I can't promise you I won't get physical again. I mean, this is in black and white. I understand context. But you're testifying and you're just telling me today, I never started a physical fight, and here you are on tape saying you did.
As I testified on the stand about this, is that when your life is at risk, not only will you take the blame for things that you shouldn't take the blame for, but when you're in an abusive dynamic, psychologically, emotionally, and physically, you don't have the resources that, say, you or I do with the luxury of saying, hey, this is black and white, because it's anything but when you're living in it.
And she kept coming back to the fact that Johnny Depp is an actor, even though she is too.
In the closing arguments, the Depp lawyer called your testimony the performance of a lifetime and said you were acting. What do you say to that?
Says the lawyer for the man who convinced the world he had scissors for fingers. I'm the performer.
All right, I give her credit. It's a good line, little Edward Scissorhands reference. But I'm not sure why she did this interview. It didn't help her. It'll just make the people who despise her dig in their heels, and I can't imagine it'll change any minds. But most problematic to me was the way she talked about the jurors and the rest of us who had doubts about her account. They weren't fools and suckers taken in by Jack Sparrow. They were just ordinary people called to serve on a jury who, after a 6-week trial, clearly didn't believe her. One of the biggest bombshells that came out of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial, and one that I think frankly hasn't gotten the attention it deserves, is the admission from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, that the organization ghost wrote, meaning they wrote, for Amber Heard, the Washington Post op-ed that a jury just yesterday found defamed Johnny Depp. Now, they awarded $10+ million to Johnny Depp. We played on this show a recorded deposition by the ACLU's general counsel, shown earlier in the trial, where he admitted the organization wrote the piece, cleared it with Heard's lawyers, who scrubbed out any mention of Johnny Depp by name, and then timed its release, of course, to the opening of Heard's movie, Aquaman. But get this. Now, the same ACLU that wrote the piece that a jury has determined defamed Johnny Depp is asking for Depp to pay all its costs associated with their testimony in the case. Radar Online uncovered a legal motion where the ACLU said it believes Depp should pay them $86,000 for, quote, production expenses, since 3 of its members were forced to testify in response to subpoenas from Depp's legal team. Depp's lawyers wanted records on the $3.5 million donation that Amber Heard had pledged to the ACLU when she got her divorce settlement. The ACLU fought the subpoenas. They lost. They filed the motion for payment before the verdict came out yesterday, arguing Depp should reimburse the ACLU for the, quote, considerable expense spent responding to onerous subpoenas served by Mr. Depp from an underlying action in which neither the ACLU nor any of its employees are parties. Sort of a reminder that maybe they're lucky that they weren't a party and they weren't sued as part of the defamation case against Amber Heard. I mean, they wrote the op-ed. So my question is, do they actually have any shot of getting any or all of that $86,000? Joining me now is David Ring, civil trial lawyer and specializes in sexual assault cases and civil litigation. He's been following the Depp-Heard saga closely. David, thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so does the ACLU have any shot of getting the money they claim they're owed?
Let's hope not. I mean, come on. It's ironic, isn't it, that they wrote this article, they put Amber Heard's name on it, and that's what caused her to now have to pay a $15 million judgment. I mean, the ACLU, it was a concerted effort with the ACLU and with Amber Heard to put this op-ed piece out there. And so for the ACLU to now come back and say, hey, gee, we were unfairly dragged into this litigation and we want $86,000 back. Boy, that's just not going to, I don't think that's going to carry the day with this judge at all. Well, I mean, they were part of this case. They deserve to be part of the case. And they're lucky they didn't get sued in the case.
Well, let me ask you, how does it typically work where a witness is subpoenaed in connection with a civil case, right? They have to come testify. There are expenses associated with that. Are they typically entitled to get that money back?
They are not typically entitled to get that money back because, hey, if you're served with a subpoena, you show up. If you're asked for documents, you produce those documents. Now, if you choose to fight and fight and fight and not produce those things and you incur costs as a result, that's on you. That's not on the party who served the subpoena. But ultimately here, look, the judge is going to have to look at this and say, what's fair here? Is it really fair for Johnny Depp to reimburse the ACLU $86,000? He might give the ACLU back a little bit of money. I don't think he's going to give them back $86,000.
I have to say that I've been surprised that the ACLU hasn't taken more heat, and they've taken some, but in my view, not enough, for writing this article. I mean, now that there is a verdict, and now that a jury has come back and said this article defamed Johnny Depp to the tune of, according to the jury, $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages, putting aside what the legal max is on that. But that's what the jury came back here. The ACLU wrote the article. And yet, they're basically saying, whoa, hey, we want to wipe our hands clean of this thing. I remain surprised that they are not enduring more criticism across the board, including by people who donate to the ACLU.
But look, if you're Amber Heard today, aren't you very upset at the ACLU who kind of dragged you into this whole thing? I mean, the testimony was that ACLU came up with the idea for her to write an op-ed piece, to put her name on it, that she would be a spokesperson and ambassador for the ACLU representing, victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And they all timed this to have it come out the day Aquaman was coming out, that she was starring in. And so, yeah, I mean, ACLU, their conduct is at best unseemly and at most unethical. I mean, it's very surprising. And I think you have to dig deep into the trial, and a lot of people didn't. But I agree with you. That is really a key part of this trial that is shocking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be interested to see, and I don't think it's going to happen, Amber Heard coming out publicly and pointing the finger at the ACLU. But here's another interesting question, is if Johnny Depp is ordered to pay the ACLU, could he then file a lawsuit now or too late?
Well, no, look, if he's ordered to pay them, he's got to pay them. It's part of the case. So, yeah. I mean, he could try to appeal that, but that's not going to be worth his time, effort, or money. So we'll have to see how the judge rules on that request. Again, I don't think ACLU has much of a chance here.
Yeah, shame on the ACLU. We keep inviting them back on the show, and I wonder why they never seem to want to come on to discuss this. David Ring, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome to Banfield. If you have ever stepped inside an American courtroom, there is a reverence like no other place. It's conservative and it's formal, and you really do have to be on your best behavior. So chewing on topics like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that's kind of out of the ordinary. And it makes everybody go silent, and it turns a lot of heads. And incidentally, that's exactly what happens when a guy like this, Johnny Depp, walks through the doors, up to the stand, and puts his hand on the Bible. could have heard a pin drop when that happened in Virginia today. Johnny Depp is in court by choice. He is the guy that's doing the suing here, and the case is messy, it's sleazy, it's dirty, it's ugly, and it's violent. He's accusing his ex-wife of defaming him by writing things about domestic violence that she says were unpleasant and downright abusive. That ex-wife is a movie star too. There she is, Amber Heard, 23 years his junior, and already very practiced at the art of testifying, because she had to do it 2 years ago in the UK when Johnny Depp took a newspaper to court saying that they were lying about him too. But today on the stand, a preview of their story, or should I say, their nightmare.
If she wanted to go to bed, I'd say, oh, well, I can't sleep, right now. And rather than go and just lay in a bed and stare at the ceiling, I would say, I'll just watch, I'll be out here watching TV or hanging out. And that was just not acceptable. Just not acceptable. It would stir up some rather unusual reactions from her. I didn't understand why as a 50-something-year-old man, was not allowed to go to sleep when I wanted to, as opposed to when she wanted to.
So here's where the case gets a bit tricky. Johnny is suing Amber because of the op-ed that she wrote for the Washington Post. She wrote about being a survivor of sexual and domestic violence, but, and it is a big but, she never specifically named Johnny in the piece. Case closed? No, not really, because it was the timeline that made it pretty clear that Johnny Depp was the subject of what she was saying. Johnny says that Amber used that op-ed in the Washington Post to advance her career and to derail his. And he denies ever abusing Amber. But he has had a pretty bad run with people believing him in the last couple of years. He lost that case in the UK. He has been dropped from several big-budget movie franchises, and his press coverage has been disastrous. And now he's suing Amber for more than $50 million. And not to be outdone, Amber has also countersued Johnny. Joining me now in this very modern-day War of the Roses is Caitlin Becker. She's an Emmy Award-winning journalist and the LA correspondent for Daily Mail TV. Okay. Caitlin, this is just such a spectacle. It was a spectacle in the UK. Throngs of people showing up, throwing epithets at Amber and cheering on Johnny. So what happened in Virginia? Same story, different country?
It was a wild day. I mean, of course, Ashley, people are going to show up. You have one of the biggest movie stars in the entire world who's been around for decades taking the stand to talk about a really messy marriage to another movie star, as you said. In addition, today, Johnny Depp went into great detail about the abuse that he suffered as a child under the hands of his mom. But it was interesting. It wasn't exactly what I expected. As you heard from that clip, he was so slow in speaking. He was almost moving backwards, super docile, almost sloth-like on the stand. His answers kind of meandered. So I think maybe what people were expecting, maybe fireworks, explosions, is just not what we got.
So he admitted on the stand, and I agree, it was a weird Johnny Depp, one I had not seen before. Almost Xanaxed, right, on the stand. So he admitted to his drug use. He actually said he started using drugs at age 11. He said he was hooked on opioids after hurting himself on the Pirate movie set. And a lot of people were sort of wondering, where is he going with all this backstory of abuse in his family? And none of that has anything to do with defamation. Was he trying to get to the jury to make them, sympathetic to him?
Certainly from my perspective, I think that is a little bit of what's happening. I think that what you saw today with Johnny Depp when he answered a lot of those questions about his past drug use, he talked about the term partying and that he's never used that term before and that he never did drugs to party or have a good time, to have that sort of wild celebrity lifestyle. What I think we heard today and what the picture that was being painted for the jury, Ashley, is a sad little boy who was abused by his mom, who turned to drugs in order to cope. And then that is how he grew up. And that, I think, is the version of Johnny Depp that certainly I think his team wanted the jury to see. And I also think that kind of goes to the affectation that he had. As you said, he was like, super slow. It was very strange. This idea that someone that docile couldn't possibly rage out, couldn't possibly fly off the handle. It feels like these things were all done in a way to really paint him in this very sort of sad, damaged, and calm light to the jury.
Like, depicting himself as a victim, because that's what he's trying to say. I have been the victim of defamation. She has said things about me that aren't true. So for anybody who didn't see what happened in the UK, and there's no cameras in the courtroom there, so this is really a spotlight on the depictions of what they say on the stand, and they're both actors. So that's really hard for a jury to watch an actor who could be doing anything and be convincing of it, right? And the same with her. She hasn't hit the stand yet. But what do you make of how he performed? Because it seemed like there was a lot of drama coming from the stand today.
There was a lot of drama coming from the stand, and it was all done in this very tamped down and subdued way. It was very, very strange. Some of these really explosive moments when he talked about his opioid addiction, when he talked about the disturbing kind of quirks in their marriage. He told a story about Amber getting upset that he wouldn't let her take his boots off himself when he came home. Very strange stuff. Kind of got lost in a little bit of the quiet. And I wonder if that was by design so that maybe we weren't honing in on it, but we were. I mean, we learned a lot about their relationship, and he oddly was very complimentary towards her and how they met on the set of Rum Diary and how he really fell for her, and their first kiss, which was in a scene, felt very real. And then he sort of painted it as she very much, turned into a completely different person in their relationship. And I do feel like he angled himself in this more positive light in a very damaged, child, that sort of wounded child who grows up. And if you can't do that on direct examination with your own lawyers, then you can't do that. So I think he is doing sort of a good job, but we'll see how that shifts. Everything changes when the other team gets up there.
It changes, because this is the easy part. Getting up on the stand with your own lawyer, lobbing the softballs at you to make you look as sympathetic as possible. It all changes when Amber's lawyer gets a crack at him and the cross-examination starts. Okay, so I got to ask you about the names, though, because it's not just these two celebrities that are involved in this case. In the UK case, we heard about Elon Musk because Johnny thought that Amber was having an affair with Elon Musk, and James Franco, who she was in a movie with, he thought that she was having an affair with James Franco. And then Paul Bettany, the actor, who had some just revolting emails back and forth with Johnny Depp about what they wanted to do to Amber Heard, how they wanted to murder her and burn her. And it was awful. I mean, Paul Bettany is probably devastated that he ever wrote any of that stuff because it came back to burn him. When are we going to maybe see all these other celebrities walking in and taking a side of either of these two?
Ashley, they are listed as potential witnesses, so I don't know if we're going to see any of them. And they are also are listed as video links. So it's very unlikely that we're going to see any of these people actually walking into the courtroom and taking the stand in this sort of dramatic fashion that we were able to see with Johnny Depp. It's much more likely that they're going to come in via video. But in these instances, as you mentioned, there was the two alleged affairs with James Franco and Elon Musk. Those are said to have happened while she was still married to Johnny Depp. There are text messages, there are photos, there's closed circuit TV footage of her and Elon looking kind of close and cozy. In one alleged text message, he offered to get her security protection when she was seeking a restraining order against Depp. So all of those things could come out. And as you said, those messages between Paul Bettany and Johnny Depp could come into play as well. He actually addressed an earlier message that we heard from another witness about wanting to throw Amber's rotting corpse in the back of a trunk. And Johnny Depp on the stand today tried to kind of play it off in this, I was in the heat of the moment, I'm expressive with my words. He evoked Hunter S. Thompson a lot and how Hunter S. Thompson sort of wrote, and it was a strange pivot, but he did say that he was ashamed of speaking like that. And
as he
yeah,
should be. The stuff that I read in that UK trial was repulsive, and it made me hate him for a hot minute there.
Yeah, it's
okay,
gross.
so look, it's a scorched earth thing, if you ask me. What I saw in the UK trial was a disaster for his brand, for her brand, from which they could never return. And I thought that this Virginia business was a dumb idea if he ever wants to reclaim his good name, because all he's doing is just dragging it all through the mud all over again. Hey, Caitlin, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm going to check in with you on a regular basis to see what, because I think she's going to take the stand pretty soon, too.
Absolutely.
So there's more to come. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Amber Heard returning to the witness stand today in the defamation trial brought by her ex-husband, Johnny Depp. The actress now telling her side of the story, opening up, saying that there were drugs and abuse, and revealing the moment that their relationship began to deteriorate. NewsNation's Sloan Glass has this story.
They first worked together in 2008 on the film The Rum Diary. Heard's testimony described those first interactions, trading books, exchanging gifts, instant chemistry, the very beginning of the relationship. But we know that's not how it ended.
We were secretly dating, and then, you know, it was beautiful. I felt that, like, when I was around Johnny, I felt like the most beautiful person in the whole world. You know, it made me feel seen, made me feel like $1 million.
Heard describes the change in the relationship that took place in 2012.
At first, when he first started drinking, I didn't really think much of it, but all of a sudden the behavior kind of started to go in line with the disappearing, and he'd come back and he'd just be different.
And the escalation from verbal degradation to violence.
At first, it was just to throw something, smash some things. He loves to smash up a place, an apartment, furniture. That's what it started with. Glass. Threw glass at me.
And Heard describing the first time she says Depp.
You think you're a funny and he slapped me again. And I'm sitting next to the man I love, and he slapped me for no reason.
The testimony continued, with Heard describing a pattern of physical abuse and drug and alcohol addiction. Sloan Glass, NewsNation.
Today, actor Johnny Depp took the stand in his defamation suit against his ex-wife Amber Heard. Depp is suing Heard over an op-ed piece where she described being a victim of domestic violence. But Depp said today he has never hit a woman, ever.
The relationship, there were arguments and things of that nature, but never did I myself reach the point of striking Miss Heard in any way, nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
We will show you more of his testimony in a moment. Now, Depp and Heard married in 2015. The marriage quickly went south. Heard accused him of multiple violent attacks against her, including physical beatings that included pulling out chunks of her hair, strangling her, and even sexual attacks. In May of 2016, she showed up to an LA courtroom with a bruised face and obtained a temporary restraining order against him. The couple settled their divorce months later, releasing a joint statement which read in part, "Our relationship was intensely passionate and at times volatile, but always bound by love." Not anymore. In December of 2018, Heard wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post headlined, "I spoke up against sexual violence and faced our culture's wrath." The op-ed mentioned the sexual assault she suffered in college and legislation she thought could help survivors. But she did not mention the name Johnny Depp. Nevertheless, he filed a $50 million defamation suit against her, claiming it ruined his reputation and his career. In 2020, Depp sued the London-based tabloid The Sun after they called him a wife-beater. The judge in that case found that there was, quote, overwhelming evidence that Depp had assaulted Heard repeatedly throughout their marriage, and she was in fear of her life. And that leads us back to today. In a Fairfax, Virginia courtroom, Depp took the stand, claiming that this is all a big lie and that he is the real victim.
So it was my responsibility, I felt, to not only attempt to clear my name for the sake of, well, for many reasons, but I wanted to clear my children of this horrid thing that they were having to read about their father.
And his attorney had him talk about his brutal childhood.
My mother was quite unpredictable. She was very unpredictable. She was she had the ability to be as cruel as anyone can be. She could become quite violent, and she was quite violent, and she was quite cruel, and though there was physical abuse, certainly, which could be in the form of an ashtray being flung at you, you know, it hits you in the head, or you'd get beat with a high-heel shoe or a telephone or whatever's handy. So in our house, there was we were never exposed to any type of safety or security.
And then he went into detail about his relationship with his ex, Amber Heard.
For a good year and a half, she was wonderful, and then things just started to change, or things started to reveal themselves. That's, I think, is a better way to put it.
And he says he is on a mission for the truth.
I pride myself on honesty. I pride myself on truth. Truth is the only thing I'm interested in. My goal is the truth. My goal is the truth because it killed me that people that I had spoken with, that I had met with over the years, who maybe were in a not such a great position and they needed advice, and I gave them the best advice I could. All I could think of was that those people would think that I was a fraud.
Joining us now, Jesse Weber, host for the Law and Crime Network, a network which I founded. He was inside the courtroom today. He's outside right now, as well as Anjanette Levy, also from the Law and Crime Network. All right, Jesse, you were in the courtroom today. What did you make of Depp's testimony? How was it in there?
I would say captivating. I think that's the best word. And when he took the stand, you could literally hear a pin drop. It was so unbelievably silent. And I looked at the jury. They did not take their attention away from Depp, not once. They didn't turn to the side. They didn't look down. They were really listening to every word he had to say. Now, he spoke very slow. He spoke very deliberate. And I kept, first of all, it was surreal watching him take the stand. And I kept wondering, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? And he started off by saying, I'm not embarrassed. This is the right thing for me to do. I'm trying to clear my name. I'm trying to clear the name of my family. And a part of it seemed to me that this appears credible. But there was something that kind of hit my attention. Not once in his opening speech did he mention the Washington Post article once. That is the basis of his entire lawsuit. So he talks about all these statements, but never really attributed to the Washington Post article. And there was one other interesting part. He talked about how he never physically abused Amber Heard, but he didn't acknowledge verbal abuse or mental abuse or psychological abuse, which I thought was interesting because later on, when he talked about his mother abusing him, he says, you know, sometimes the verbal abuse and the psychological abuse was worse than the physical abuse. And for me, listening to that, I think that is a moment that Amber Heard's lawyers are going to jump on later on because they're accusing him of all forms of abuse. So it was a fascinating day. I can't wait to hear what he says next.
All right, and I'm going to be playing a bit more of what he said inside that courtroom. But Anjanette, let me get your first reaction to Johnny Depp's testimony. Did anything strike you in particular?
I was struck by, I expected, I guess, more of an actor, to see more of a, a performance. And I'm not sure, maybe this is a performance, but we were on the air today watching this live, and he seemed authentic. He seems shy, and in some respects, kind of raw and almost just real. So I don't know. The abuse at the hands of his mother, the way his father reacted to it, that really stuck with me, because he said the dad would take it. And then dad eventually left. His father eventually left, driving his mother into a deep depression. So I think that, if you're looking at somebody who's learned how to deal with abuse by a woman, which he alleges, you look to his father, who stood there and took it. And often welled up in tears, he said, as the abuse, the verbal abuse or physical abuse was being inflicted upon his father.
And Jeanette, it sounds like you are buying what Johnny Depp is offering here. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that in a second, but I want to just play one more piece of sound. This is number 4. This is Depp saying that, in effect, Amber Heard started to try to control him.
If she wanted to go to bed, I'd say, oh, well, I can't sleep, right now. And rather than go and just lay in a bed and stare at the ceiling, I would say, I'll just watch. I'll be out here watching TV or hanging out, and that was just not acceptable. Just not acceptable. It would stir up some rather unusual reactions from her. I didn't understand why as a 50-something-year-old man, was not allowed to go to sleep when I wanted to.
All right, and Jeanette, now let me give you your chance to respond to my flippant comment about your assessment of his testimony.
No, look, I've done a lot of stories about domestic violence over the years, and I've covered, unfortunately, some domestic violence cases that made it into courtrooms and things like that. So, these are just my observations, and having taken, psychology classes in college and things like that, and just knowing a lot of people in the psychology, sphere. So these are things that I'm well aware of, and my mom's a therapist. So it's still early on in this, but I thought it was something that stuck with me and struck me, the fact that he was almost mirroring, he claims, his father's behavior. Obviously, Amber Heard is claiming something much different, that he abused her and he was physical and verbally abusive.
I want to play a piece of sound, because there have been allegations of him having substance abuse problems, and also that being reflected on the set of films that he's been involved in. This is number 7. Here is what Johnny Depp said.
There's been no abuse of substances on film sets. There have been there's been no moments where I would have been considered out of control. Never. In fact, it's not been mentioned. I'm sure they don't want to mention it, but I remember that because when I was with Ms. Heard and her friends, and we were all drinking wine, and I smoking marijuana, they used to tease me because of what they said was a ludicrous tolerance, because I never appeared loaded or high or any of that. Even if I felt a little spinny, no one would have ever known.
Jesse Weber, this seems more like the Johnny Depp rehabilitation tour than it does something specifically related to the case at issue.
Well, it's a very important point. And the reason it's important is because he is saying that the Washington Post article is what torpedoed his career, that it was the statements of Amber Heard that torpedoed his career. It is Amber Heard's side's position that it was Johnny Depp's own behavior, his drug abuse, that led to the demise of his career. And this all happened before the Washington Post article. So we even heard testimony today from a sound technician who was good friends with Johnny Depp and said he's been very professional on sets. I've never seen him act in a different way that got him kicked off or anything like that. And then, you know, he was pressed a little bit on what happened on Pirates of the Caribbean 5. There was such a delay because of Johnny Depp's behavior. So this is an important point. And also, look, Johnny Depp's team is getting in front of it. They're not denying that he has substance abuse problems. But what they are saying is you might have drug abuse problems, you might have substance abuse problems, but that doesn't make you somebody who engages in domestic abuse. So they're trying to get out in front of it, but it also plays a very critical role in the defamation case.
Right. All right, Anjanette and Jesse, stick around, because coming up, Johnny Depp saying he has become a pariah in Hollywood who no one will hire. Now, it seems to me that everyone might be able to agree on that, but he talks about it. Coming up in a moment. One of the biggest bombshells that came out of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation trial, and one that I think frankly hasn't gotten the attention it deserves, is the admission from the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, that the organization ghost wrote, meaning they wrote, for Amber Heard, the Washington Post op-ed that a jury just yesterday found defamed Johnny Depp. Now, they awarded $10+ million to Johnny Depp. We played on this show a recorded deposition by the ACLU's general counsel, shown earlier in the trial, where he admitted the organization wrote the piece, cleared it with Heard's lawyers, who scrubbed out any mention of Johnny Depp by name, and then timed its release, of course, to the opening of Heard's movie Aquaman. But get this. Now, the same ACLU that wrote the piece that a jury has determined defamed Johnny Depp is asking for Depp to pay all its costs associated with their testimony in the case. Radar Online uncovered a legal motion where the ACLU said it believes Depp should pay them $86,000 for, quote, production expenses, since 3 of its members were forced to testify in response to subpoenas from Depp's legal team. Depp's lawyers wanted records on the $3.5 million donation that Amber Heard had pledged to the ACLU when she got a divorce settlement. The ACLU fought the subpoenas. They lost. They filed the motion for payment before the verdict came out yesterday, arguing Depp should reimburse the ACLU for the, quote, considerable expense spent responding to onerous subpoenas served by Mr. Depp from an underlying action in which neither the ACLU nor any of its employees are parties. Sort of a reminder that maybe they're lucky that they weren't a party and they weren't sued as part of the defamation case against Amber Heard. I mean, they wrote the op-ed. So my question is, do they actually have any shot of getting any or all of that $86,000? Joining me now is David Ring, civil trial lawyer and specializes in sexual assault cases and civil litigation. He's been following the Depp-Heard saga closely. David, thanks for coming on the program. Appreciate it. All right, so does the ACLU have any shot of getting the money they claim they're owed?
Let's hope not. I mean, come on. It's ironic, isn't it, that they wrote this article, they put Amber Heard's name on it, and that's what caused her to now have to pay a $15 million judgment. I mean, the ACLU, it was a concerted effort with the ACLU and with Amber Heard to put this op-ed piece out there. And so for the ACLU to now come back and say, hey, gee, we were unfairly dragged into this litigation and we want $86,000 back. Boy, that's just not going to, I don't think that's going to carry the day with this judge at all. Well, I mean, they were part of this case. They deserve to be part of the case. And they're lucky they didn't get sued in the case.
Well, let me ask you, how does it typically work where a witness is subpoenaed in connection with a civil case, right? They have to come testify. There are expenses associated with that. Are they typically entitled to get that money back?
They are not typically entitled to get that money back because, hey, if you're served with a subpoena, you show up. If you're asked for documents, you produce those documents. Now, if you choose to fight and fight and fight and not produce those things and you incur costs as a result, that's on you. That's not on the party who served the subpoena. But ultimately here, look, the judge is going to have to look at this and say, what's fair here? You know, is it really fair for Johnny Depp to reimburse the ACLU $86,000? He might give the ACLU back a little bit of money. I don't think he's going to give them back $86,000.
I have to say that I've been surprised that the ACLU hasn't taken more heat, and they've taken some, but in my view, not enough, for writing this article. I mean, now that there is a verdict, and now that a jury has come back and said this article defamed Johnny Depp to the tune of, according to the jury, $15 million in compensatory and punitive damages, putting aside what the legal max is on that. But that's what the jury came back here. The ACLU wrote the article. And yet, you know, they're basically saying, whoa, hey, you know, we want to wipe our hands clean of this thing. I remain surprised that they are not enduring more criticism across the board, including by people who donate to the ACLU.
But look, if you're Amber Heard today, aren't you very upset at the ACLU who kind of dragged you into this whole thing? I mean, the testimony was that ACLU came up with the idea for her to write an op-ed piece, to put her name on it, that she would be a spokesperson and ambassador for the ACLU representing, you know, victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And they all timed this to have it come out the day Aquaman was coming out, that she was starring in. And so, yeah, I mean, ACLU, their conduct is at best unseemly and at most unethical. I mean, it's very surprising. And I think you have to dig deep into the trial, and a lot of people didn't. But I agree with you. That is really a key part of this trial that is shocking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be interested to see, and I don't think it's going to happen, Amber Heard coming out publicly and pointing the finger at the ACLU. But here's another interesting question, is if Johnny Depp is ordered to pay the ACLU, could he then file a lawsuit now or too late?
Well, no, look, if he's ordered to pay them, he's got to pay them. It's part of the case. So, yeah. I mean, he could try to appeal that, but that's not going to be worth his time, effort, or money. So we'll have to see how the judge rules on that request. Again, I don't think ACLU has much of a chance here.
Yeah, shame on the ACLU. We keep inviting them back on the show, and I wonder why they never seem to want to come on to discuss this. David Ring, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thankfully, the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard trial is finally coming to an end, but not before a blockbuster day where Depp himself took the stand again, and Kate Moss, the supermodel who dated Depp between '94 and '98, also testified. Depp is suing Heard. Heard is countersuing Depp. They're both accusing the other of lying about the other one and of physical and emotional abuse. Today, Kate Moss discussed an allegation referenced on the witness stand by Amber Heard when she testified that she was thinking about Depp pushing Moss down a set of stairs while the two were dating in the 1990s.
What, if anything, happened when you were in Jamaica with Mr. Depp?
We were leaving the room, and Johnny left the room before I did, and there had been a rainstorm, and as I left the room, I slid down the stairs, and I hurt my back.
How did you...
And
I apologize, Ms. Moss. Please continue.
And I screamed because I was because I didn't know what had happened to me, and I was in pain. And he came running back to help me and carried me to my room and got me medical attention.
Did Mr. Depp push you in any way down the stairs?
No.
During the course of your relationship, did he ever push you down any stairs?
No, he never pushed me, kicked me, or threw me down any stairs.
All right, so a little win there for Johnny Depp. Now, after Moss was finished, Depp was back on the stand himself, claimed Amber Heard took that alleged stairs incident and ran with it.
I ran over and grabbed her to make sure she was all right. That's it. That's all I ever. That's the whole story. But then the rumor of it, I'd never heard a rumor of that before Miss Heard grabbed hold of it. It's like that. I'm sorry.
Then Depp discussed Amber Heard's sister, Whitney, basically said that he, Johnny Depp, wasn't Amber's only victim. He even said that Heard would do this to her own sister.
She would have wine thrown in her face.
And who was the source of those demeaning words and the wine that you just referenced?
Well, that would be Amber Heard, her sister.
And
in New York, which I think that even made it into the papers.
And then he was asked what he thought of hearing, sitting there listening in court, to Heard's testimony.
what has it been like for you to listen to Ms. Heard's testimony at this trial?
I'm sorry?
What has it been like for you to listen to Ms. Heard's testimony at this trial?
Insane. It's insane to hear heinous accusations of violence, sexual violence, that she's attributed to me, that she's...
And he says that he has no regrets about bringing the lawsuit.
No human being is perfect, certainly not. None of us. But I have never in my life committed sexual battery, physical abuse, all these outlandish, outrageous stories of me committing these things and living with it for 6 years and waiting to be able to bring the truth out. So this is not easy for any of us. I know that. But no matter what happens, I did get here, and I did tell the truth.
Remember that technically this lawsuit is about Amber Heard's December 2018 Washington Post piece titled "I Spoke Up Against Sexual Violence," a piece where she didn't mention Depp by name. But here's the good news for those who don't own a live trial network. The judge has given each side a time limit to present their cases, so in 2 days, the 7 jurors, 7, it's a weird number, will deliberate and need to come back unanimously for Depp to win his case or Heard to win hers. Joining us now is Jesse Weber, host for the Law and Crime Network, which I founded. He's been covering this case extensively, including spending time inside the courtroom. Jesse, good to have you. So there was talk that Amber Heard's team would call Depp back to the stand. That always seemed like grandstanding to me. I don't believe that they ever were seriously considering that. But now his own team puts him back up there. Did he help his case?
This was so unnecessary, Dan. I mean, the parts that you played were the more, parts that really helped his case. I get it. He wanted to take the stand. It's his case. Give the final story. Respond to Amber Heard some of her allegations. But the problem was, under cross-examination, he was so evasive. He was so argumentative. He got caught up in inconsistencies. He would deny things that he was that he was then confronted with in text messages and photographs that I don't see how this was necessary and how it helped him overall. I mean, just to give you an example of this, he claims on the stand today that Amber Heard assaulted him on the Orient Express. Then he shows a photo of an injury to his eye. And then under cross-examination, they present him with a photograph from the day before with that same injury. And he doesn't have a great excuse for why it's there. So again, if this is the last thing that the jury's going to hear, primacy and recency, his attorney did such a great job of cross-examining Amber Heard. He might have just left it there. Let the other evidence present itself. I know he wanted to give the final word. Just don't know if it hurt him more than it helped him.
And Kate Moss, small victory, right, for Johnny Depp. I mean, it was great seeing her. She looks terrific, and it seemed like a nice courtroom moment, but significant?
I mean, she was on the stand for 5 minutes, definitely helped his case. To say that Amber Heard was peddling a rumor that was unfounded, sure, it's definitely helpful. But, you know, I don't think that's going to change the fabric of this entire case. The jury might just use that and say, you know what, Amber Heard, she's been maybe dishonest about so many different things. This is another thing that she obviously knew about. Johnny Depp told her about Kate Moss, and yet she told us this anyway. I don't like that way that looks. But that, I think, is the most it's going to go.
So they need a unanimous 7-person jury. Very rare to have a 7-person jury. Any shot you see here of Depp being to pull this off and getting 7 people to vote for him?
Anything is possible. It is difficult to predict where juries come from. I am just of the opinion that if the jury gets a broad instruction on what domestic abuse is, they could say, we have been hit with so much evidence of verbal abuse, smashing cabinets, the text messages, it might be too much. Now, I will tell you, the sexual violence component that's in the headline of the defamation article, the Washington Post article, if that is presented to the jury, because there's a question if it be dismissed, if it is presented to the jury, that might be problematic for Amber Heard. That is a really serious allegation. They might not believe that happened. I think that's the best shot for Johnny Depp right now.
And if they don't believe that that happened specifically, so it depends on what the judge's instruction is on that, right?
It is, but remember, it's 3 statements in particular. They could find any one of those to be defamation. And then, of course, it's the question of the counterclaims, which is a whole separate area for Amber Heard.
All right. Jesse Weber, as always, thank you.